All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, we're jumping into a huge topic for A-level psychology, gender and how we cope with stress. Now, this isn't just a simple boys versus girls thing. We're going to get into the real science behind it all, looking at the nuances that will help you nail those top marks. Okay, let's get into it. So, let's kick off with the big question, the one everyone kind of wonders about. Are men and women just wired differently when it comes to stress? It's a really common idea, right? But as we're about to see, the real story psychology tells us is, well, it's way more complex and, honestly, a lot more interesting.
The absolute key to getting your head around this topic and to writing a brilliant exam answer is this one word right here: biopsychosocial. I know, it sounds a bit jargony, but it's just a framework that looks at biology, psychology, and social factors all working together. Seriously, understanding this is your ticket to doing really well.
So, here's our game plan. First, we'll cover the core theories. That's your AO1 description marks, the bread and butter. Then, we'll look at how these theories work in the real world for those AO2 application marks. After that, we're going to get critical and evaluate everything. That's where the crucial AO3 marks are. And finally, we'll pull it all together so you can craft a killer conclusion. Right, let's build our foundation with AO1. This section is all about the essential theories and studies that you absolutely need to be able to describe clearly in an exam. So first up, we've got this classic idea from Lazarus and Folkman. They basically split coping into two main styles. You've got problem-focused coping, which is exactly what it sounds like, tackling the problem head-on. And then there's emotion-focused coping, which is all about managing how you feel about the stress. Now, research, like a key study by Platek and his colleagues back in 1994, suggests there's a general trend. Men tend to report more problem-focused coping, and women report more emotion-focused. But, and this is super important to remember, it's a trend, not a rule.
You know, for the longest time, stress research was all about fight or flight. But then Taylor and her colleagues came along in 2000 and pointed out a massive bias. Most of that research was done on men. So they proposed an alternative model, tend and befriend, arguing that from an evolutionary perspective, women often developed different strategies, partly driven by that powerful bonding hormone oxytocin.
So what does tend and befriend actually look like? Well, it breaks down into two pretty straightforward parts. Tending is all about nurturing, protecting your kids, looking after people, which helps reduce their distress and, in turn, your own. And befriending? That's about reaching out to your social network, building those alliances and getting support from your friends. It's the whole safety in numbers idea. Now, a big meta-analysis by Tamris in 2002 did find that women do, on average, seek more social support. But, ding, 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 this is a perfect opportunity for a gravy valuation point. Let's think about the G, generalizability. A lot of this foundational research was done in Western individualistic cultures. So we have to ask a critical question. Can we confidently apply these findings to everyone everywhere? That's a great point to raise. Okay, let's move on to AO2 and see how we can build on this. This is where you take all that core knowledge and apply it to real-life situations. It's how you show the examiner that you don't just know the theories, you really understand them. Let's imagine a really high-pressure workplace, like a school during exam season. It's a perfect place to see these patterns. You might have female teachers getting together to talk things through and seek emotional support from colleagues. At the same time, you might see male teachers staying late to reorganize their lesson plans, tackling the problem head-on. This shows it's often about role expectations, not just some biological defaults. Or think about the intense stress of being a caregiver. This is a brilliant example of tend and befriend in action. Female caregivers might build strong support networks to share the emotional load. Male caregivers, on the other hand, might lean more into problem-focused coping, like taking charge of the finances or researching treatments. The type of stressor really matters here. And here's a fantastic synoptic link you can make, connecting us all to psychopathology. Because coping styles aren't neutral. They can have real consequences. For example, rumination. That's when you get stuck going over and over negative feelings. A type of emotion-focused coping is a known risk factor for depression. On the other hand, avoidant coping strategies, which are sometimes reported more by men, have been linked to things like substance misuse. We can even bring this right back to the biological approach. That hormone, oxytocin that we mentioned, the one linked to tend and befriend, it can actually help calm the body's physical stress response. In contrast, some theories suggest that testosterone might actually amplify the fight or flight reaction. It's a perfect illustration of how our biology and our behavior are constantly interacting. Okay, this is it. This is where the top marks are really won.
Section 3, AO3, Evaluation. Let's put on our critical thinking hats and look at the strengths and the weaknesses of this whole area of research.
First step, the strengths. Well, there's a pretty solid base of research evidence from studies like the ones from Plotzik, Tamris, and Taylor that all find similar patterns. That biopsychosocial framework is also a huge strength. It gives us a much more sophisticated, multi-layered explanation. And finally, this research has great real-world value. It can help us design better, more tailored mental health support. But we have to be critical, right? So what are the limitations? Well, a big one is the risk of accidentally reinforcing gender stereotypes. There's also a huge reliance on self-report questionnaires. And you have to wonder, are people telling us how they really cope or how they think they're supposed to cope? And maybe the most crucial point, maybe the differences we see have less to do with gender and more to do with the different kinds of stressors men and women tend to face in their lives.
Let's explicitly flag another grave point here, this time focusing on V for validity. That reliance on questionnaires, it really makes you question the internal validity of the findings. If people are trying to look good, which we call social desirability bias, then can we be sure we're actually measuring their true coping behavior? That is a very powerful evaluation point to make in an essay. So let's bring it all home. How do you pull all of this together to structure a sophisticated 16-mark answer? This is your model for how to do it. The most crucial point is this. You have to understand that these findings are about probabilities across large groups. They are not prescriptions for individuals. It's about what is more likely to happen, not what is set in stone. The amount of variation within genders is absolutely huge. And this brings us right back to our star player, the biopsychosocial model. The very best answers will always weave these three strands together. You'll talk about biological influences like hormones, cognitive factors like how we even think about a stressor in the first place, and of course, powerful social forces like gender roles. So if you take one single thing away from this whole explainer, let it be this. It's the interaction that counts. You have to avoid simplistic statements like men do this and women do that. The top band answers will always discuss the complex interplay between all these different factors. That's the hallmark of a truly sophisticated psychological argument. And I'll leave you with a final thought to mull over. We've seen just how much of this is shaped by socialization and gender roles. So what do you think will happen as those roles continue to evolve and equalize? Will these coping differences just shrink and eventually disappear, or will they stick around? Thinking about questions like that is what takes your understanding to the next level.